The polished leather of Officer Derek Sullivan's standard-issue boot crunched with a satisfying, authoritative finality on the immaculate, sun-warmed concrete of Maple Drive. The sound was a percussive note of order in the symphony of a perfect Brookhaven morning. Here, in the enclave's widest, most manicured artery, the sidewalks were not merely paths, but statements, swept, power-washed, and unblemished by the chaotic scuffs of ordinary life. The air itself smelled of money, a subtle blend of freshly cut Kentucky bluegrass, blooming tea olives, and the faint, clean scent of chlorine from hidden backyard pools. Sullivan, a man whose physique was slowly succumbing to the twin pressures of desk duty and fast food, felt a familiar sense of proprietary pride as his patrol car idled at the curb. He was a guardian at the gate, a shepherd for this flock of the privileged. His eyes, pale and perpetually narrowed behind his aviator sunglasses, scanned the landscape with a practiced, suspicious gaze. It was then that the anomaly registered, a dissonant chord in the visual harmony. A black man, standing idly near the curb of the Morrison property, as if he belonged there. The suit the man wore was a masterpiece of tailoring, a dark, elegant fabric that whispered of boardrooms and private clubs, not department store racks. The cut was European, the fit impeccable. To Sullivan, however, the suit was not a sign of success, but a costume, a flagrant provocation. It was too expensive, too confident. It screamed of something stolen, or at the very least, ill-gotten. A familiar, acidic twist of disgust coiled in Sullivan's gut. This was what they did, wasn't it? They flaunted, they pretended, they tried to step into a world that had not been built for them. He killed the engine of his Crown Victoria, the silence that followed feeling heavier, more charged than the engine's rumble. He took his time exiting the vehicle, adjusting his duty belt with a practiced heft, letting the man feel the weight of his observation. The morning silence, once peaceful, now felt brittle, ready to shatter. He approached, his boots a deliberate, menacing metronome. "What the hell you think you're doing here, boy?" Sullivan's voice cut through the calm, sharp and contemptuous, devoid of any professional courtesy. It was the voice he reserved for those he deemed beneath his notice, a whip crack meant to intimidate and establish dominance. The man turned. His movement was not startled, not hurried, but smooth and deliberate. His eyes, a deep, intelligent brown, took in Sullivan's approach with an unnerving calm. They held no fear, only a cool, analytical assessment that Sullivan found instantly infuriating. "Officer," the man said, his voice a low, controlled baritone, "I'd advise you to shut your mouth." The words were not shouted, but they carried, each one enunciated with a precision that felt like a physical slap. Sullivan's face flushed a mottled red. Shut your mouth? To him? The audacity was a spark on the tinder of his prejudice. He closed the remaining distance in 2 quick strides, his personal space invasion a tactic of control. He didn't ask. He grabbed the man's wrist, his own grip, calloused and strong from years on the job, and twisted the arm to examine the watch. It was heavy, platinum, with a complex face, a Rolex. Of course it was. "Is this stolen?" Sullivan snarled, his breath, sour with the dregs of his morning coffee, washing over the man's face. "Are you breaking into these houses, looking for an easy score?" He didn't wait for an answer. He shoved the man backward, a sharp, aggressive push meant to off-balance and humiliate. "Turn around. Hands behind your back. Now." "Now, officer, please," the man said, the words a calm, reasonable protest, but Sullivan could hear the steel beneath the civility. It only enraged him further. He slammed the man hard against the sleek silver hood of a BMW 7 Series parked in the driveway. The metallic thud was a vulgar sound that echoed down the pristine street, a violation of the morning's peace. The car's alarm system chirped in protest, a weak electronic whimper. I said, "Turn around, you piece of shit," Sullivan growled, leaning in close, his mouth near the man's ear. "You don't belong here." The man's face was pressed against the cool metal. His expensive suit, a Xenia wool-silk blend that had cost more than Sullivan's monthly mortgage payment, wrinkled against the polished hood. Yet his voice, when it came, was still contained, though the rage simmering beneath the surface was now a palpable heat. "I live in this house." Sullivan barked a short, cruel laugh, a harsh sound devoid of any genuine humor. "Sure you do, and I'm Barack fucking Obama." Have you ever witnessed such raw, humiliating hatred directed at someone simply for existing? The question hung in the air, unspoken but felt by every molecule. 9:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the call. The cold, unyielding metal of his own BMW's hood pressed against Terence Washington's chest, a sensation of profound violation. 23 years. 23 years of federal service, of navigating the labyrinthine corridors of power in Washington, of briefing senators and directing field operations that safeguarded national security. He had faced down arms dealers, cyber-terrorists, and corrupt politicians without his pulse spiking. And now he was being treated like a common criminal, a thug, on his own property. The irony was a bitter pill lodged in his throat. He could feel the eyes upon him. From behind the pristine hedges of the Henderson house, from the large bay window of the Carter residence, from the upstairs balcony of the Colonial next door, the neighborhood was watching, a silent audience to his public shaming. He closed his eyes for a brief second, drawing on a deep well of training and personal discipline. Do not react. Do not escalate. Observe and document. It was the mantra of his professional life, now applied to the most personal of assaults. ID, now. Sullivan's breath was a foul cloud of stale coffee and contempt. Terence moved with the deliberate, unhurried slowness of a man defusing a bomb. Any sudden gesture, any twitch that could be misinterpreted as resistance, could turn this degrading scene into a violent one. He knew the statistics, the tragic narratives that began with exactly this kind of encounter. His fingers, steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him, found the familiar softness of his wallet. It was an Italian craft, a Bottega Veneta Intrecciato leather billfold, a gift from his wife Kesha after his last promotion to assistant director. It had been her proud, loving celebration of his achievement. Now it was being treated as evidence of a crime. Sullivan snatched it from his hand, his movements greedy and rough. He flipped through the contents not like an officer verifying identification, but like a thief searching for valuables, his thick fingers rifling through credit cards, membership slips, and the small, worn photograph of Kesha and their daughter Maya. "Terence Washington," he read aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. "What kind of made-up name is that?" "It's my name, officer," Terence replied, his voice flat. "Bullshit." Sullivan held up the Federal Credit Union Platinum card, tilting it in the sunlight, as if searching for a forgery's flaw. "Where'd you steal this from? This is government-issued. You some kind of clerk? Janitor?" The implication was clear. A man who looked like Terence could only have acquired such a thing through theft or menial labor. Across the street, behind the safety of her hydrangea bushes, Eleanor Carter's hands trembled as she held her smartphone steady. The live icon glowed a damning red. She was a retired librarian, a woman who believed in order, rules, and fundamental decency. What she was witnessing felt like a tear in the very fabric of civility. "I don't know what to do," she whispered into her phone's microphone, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and outrage. The viewer count in the corner of her screen was climbing, a rapid, digital heartbeat. 150, 300, 800. This is absolutely disgusting. He lives here. I've seen him every morning for 3 years. He leaves for work at 7:15. He waves. His name is Terence. The comments section exploded into a modern-day Greek chorus. Justice seeker, call the FBI. This is 2025, not 1955. Lawyer up. Sue them for everything. The car, the house, his pension. Karens against racism. His suit costs more than that cop's yearly salary. Idiot. But slithering through the outrage were other darker voices emerging from the anonymous depths of the internet. Truth teller. He looks suspicious to me, probably casing the neighborhood. That Carmack is a trap. American patriot. These people don't belong in places like that. They drive up property values, then the whole character changes. Safety first. Good on the cop. Better safe than sorry. Brookhaven has standards. Sullivan's radio crackled to life, a burst of static that sliced through the tension. Unit 47 requesting backup on Maple Drive. Possible 10:16. A domestic disturbance. Sullivan keyed his shoulder mic, not taking his eyes off Terence. Copy that, 47. Unit 23 en route. He was Unit 23. He was not leaving. Terence's phone buzzed softly in his jacket pocket, a specific sequential vibration pattern he recognized. He didn't need to look to know the caller ID read, Director Jensen, FBI. He declined the call with a subtle shift of his weight. He checked his watch, an Omega coaxial master chronometer, a testament to precision, not flash. The Federal Credit Union card wasn't the only thing Sullivan had missed. The small, subtle eagle insignia pinned to his lapel, a piece of jewelry Sullivan had undoubtedly dismissed as a fashion accessory, caught a sliver of the morning sun. To the initiated, it was a badge of a different kind. "You got a permit for this, neighborhood boy?" Sullivan shoved the wallet back at Terence's chest, forcing him to grab it. "Rich folks around here pay good money to keep your kind out." Terence took the wallet, his movements still slow, still controlled. He met Sullivan's gaze squarely, his eyes now holding a glint of something beyond patience, a cold, hard certainty. "Officer Sullivan," Terence said, reading the nameplate on his uniform with the deliberate enunciating clarity of a judge passing sentence. "I'm going to ask you to step back." Sullivan's eyebrows shot up. "You'll ask me?" The sheer, unbelievable gall of it. His hand moved from his hip to rest on the textured grip of his department-issued taser. "You're giving me orders now?" The sound of another patrol car, its engine a growing hum that quickly sharpened into the crunch of tires on asphalt, made Terence's jaw tighten imperceptibly. This was escalating exactly as the predictive models from his own Civil Rights Division had forecasted. Multiple officers, a residential setting, a subject of color perceived as non-compliant. The script was being followed to the letter, and it was a tragedy played out on a loop across America. The only variable, the one thing, the models couldn't account for was the live streaming camera from across the street. Mrs. Carter was his unknowing guardian angel. Officer Janet Mills stepped out of the second cruiser. She was younger than Sullivan, sharper, her uniform neat, and her eyes quickly scanning, absorbing details. She saw the handcuffed black man in an expensive suit, the expensive car, the multi-million-dollar colonial house, and her partner's agitated, red-faced posture. The cognitive dissonance was immediate. Something was off. Sullivan waved her over, his relief palpable. He had backup. His authority was now reinforced. "Mills, got a suspicious individual here. Claims he lives in the Morrison house." He jerked his thumb toward the imposing structure behind them. Mills looked from the house. A pristine example of Georgian architecture, with a perfectly manicured lawn that screamed Old money. Back to Terence. Her expression was a mask of professional neutrality, but her eyes betrayed her skepticism. The math, in her experience, didn't add up. "Sir," she said, her tone cooler, more procedural than Sullivan's vitriol, "do you have any documentation proving residence?" Terence offered a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He was giving her a chance, a door to walk through that Sullivan had already slammed shut. He reached, with theatrical slowness, into his jacket's inner pocket. Both officers tensed in unison, their hands drifting toward their sidearms. The morning air grew thick, charged with the potential for sudden violence. He produced a simple set of keys. The BMW's distinctive fob was prominent, but there were others. A Schlegel house key, a smaller mailbox key, a fob for a gym. Sullivan grabbed them, his fist closing around the metal. He examined each one as if it were a piece of a puzzle he was determined to misread. "Could have made copies," he declared. "Could have stolen the car. Means nothing." From across the street, Mrs. Carter's voice, fortified by the growing numbers on her live stream, carried across the divide. "Officers, he's lived here for 3 years. His name is on the mailbox. For God's sake—" "Ma'am, please step back from the situation," Mills called out, a reflexive department-issue response. "We're conducting an investigation." "Investigation into what?" Mrs. Carter shot back, her phone still held high. "A man standing in his own driveway. This is profiling, and you know it." 9:52 a.m. 8 minutes remaining. Terence's phone buzzed again in his pocket, the same sequential pattern. Director Jensen, FBI. He declined it again, but this time he allowed the faintest ghost of a smile to touch his lips. It was not a smile of amusement, but of confirmation. The machinery was in motion. Sullivan, focused on the keys like a dog with a bone, caught the expression. "What's funny, boy?" His voice was getting louder, fraying at the edges, the aggression looking more and more like panic. "You think this is some kind of joke?" "No, officer," Terence replied, his voice even. "I think this is exactly what I expected." The comment landed with the impact of a physical blow. Sullivan's eyes widened. "Expected? Are you saying you planned this?" The paranoia was now out in the open, a living thing between them. More neighbors were emerging, drawn by the commotion like spectators to a car crash. The Hendersons from next door stood on their porch, their faces a mixture of concern and morbid curiosity. Elderly Mrs. Patterson, walking her perfectly groomed standard poodle, had stopped dead in her tracks, her hand fluttering to her throat. The Wilson twins, 2 lanky teenagers on their morning jog, had slowed to a walk, their AirPods silencing as they watched the real-world drama unfold. Some of the faces showed genuine alarm, a dawning horror. Others, however, held a different expression, a kind of grim satisfaction, as if a long-held suspicion had finally been validated. And then, from the corner house, Karen Mitchell appeared. She was the HOA coordinator, a woman who wore her self-appointed authority like a crown. Her jogging outfit was expensive Lululemon, and she had pinned her official HOA coordinator badge to the strap, as if she might need to assert her jurisdiction at a moment's notice. She had been the one person, the only person, who had never welcomed Terence and Kesha to the neighborhood. Her welcome wagon had been a list of bylaw infractions she'd noticed during their move-in. "Officers," Karen said, approaching with an air of officious certainty. "We've had several break-ins lately in the adjacent cul-de-sac. High-end electronics, jewelry. Better safe than sorry." She didn't look at Terence as she spoke, effectively erasing him from the conversation. Mills nodded, latching onto the offered justification. "See, the community is concerned about security." Terence looked directly at Karen Mitchell, his gaze steady and unnerving. "I've lived here since the fall of 2022, Ms. Mitchell. I've never once been contacted by an HOA coordinator for a welcome meeting. I find that curious." "Because you're not supposed to be here," Karen replied coldly, her voice dropping, though it was still audible. "This neighborhood has standards. We have an understanding." The live stream was going viral. 2,147 viewers, 3,500. Local news outlets, their scanners tuned to police frequencies and social media trends, were picking up the feed. Dana Williams, Channel 7's star investigative reporter, was already en route, her producer feeding her details. From Mrs. Carter's stream, hashtags began blooming like digital wildflowers. Not Brookhaven racism, justice for Terrence, no blacktail stories. But Terrence wasn't watching the social media firestorm. His focus was internal. On the countdown, his Omega, the small encrypted message indicator on its bezel, blinked once, then twice. A silent, technological heartbeat. His federal contact was getting impatient. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 was imminent. "You know what?" Sullivan stepped closer, his chest nearly touching Terrence's, a classic intimidation tactic. Terrence could smell the stale coffee, the faint scent of his cheap aftershave, the sweat of his own anxiety. "I think we need to take a ride downtown. Let the detectives sort this out." "On what charge?" Terrence asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Trespassing, public disturbance, failure to comply with lawful orders." Terrence looked directly into Sullivan's eyes, and for the first time he let the full force of his will, the authority of his 23 years, show in his gaze. "Officer, I strongly recommend you wait." "Wait for what, smart guy?" "You'll see." 9:56 a.m. 4 minutes remaining. The steel handcuffs clicked into place with a sound of terrible finality. They were cold and too tight, biting into the fine bones of Terrence's wrists. Sullivan forced him against the side of the patrol car, the rough texture of the paint scraping against the exquisite wool of his suit jacket. Yet his expression remained a placid mask, the calm at the center of the storm. "You have the right to remain silent," Sullivan began, his voice dripping with a triumphant performative satisfaction. He was following procedure, layering legality over his brutality. "Officer Sullivan," Terrence's voice cut through the Miranda rights like a scalpel. "Badge number 4471. I want you to remember that number." Sullivan paused, the rote speech dying in his throat. "What did you say?" "Your badge number, 4471. I want you to remember it." Something in Terrence's tone, not a threat, but a promise, a statement of absolute certainty, made Sullivan's confidence waver for a single, heart-stopping moment. Then the anger rushed back in, hotter and more frantic than before. "You're threatening me, boy. I'm simply asking you to remember your badge number." 9:58 a.m. 2 minutes remaining. The third patrol car arrived, this one with the sergeant's insignia on the door. Sergeant Marcus Rodriguez had 15 years on the force, and it showed in the weary, knowing way he exited his vehicle. He took in the scene with a single, sweeping glance. The handcuffed black man in an obviously expensive suit, the two officers, the growing and agitated crowd, the dozens of phones held aloft like digital torches. His experienced mind began calculating the political, legal, and public relations fallout instantly. This was a disaster in the making. "What have we got?" Rodriguez asked, his voice a low, calming baritone as he approached Mills. "Trespassing suspect, Sarge," Mills reported, though her voice lacked conviction. "Claims he lives in the Morrison house." Rodriguez's eyes flicked to the multi-million-dollar colonial, then back to Terrence's attire, his posture, his unnerving calm. The pieces didn't fit the narrative. Any ID? Sullivan held up the wallet as if it were a trophy. Says Terence Washington. Probably fake. The Federal Credit Union card, too. Rodriguez took the wallet and examined the card more closely than Sullivan had. The holograms were correct. The embossing was precise. "These are hard to counterfeit," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. "Probably stolen," Karen Mitchell interjected, stepping closer to the circle of authority. "I'm the HOA coordinator. I know everyone who belongs here." She said belongs with a particular emphasis, drawing a line in the social sand. Mrs. Carter's live stream had exploded. The viewer count hit 8,000, a number that seemed to suck the air out of the street. The comment section was a war zone, a raw, unfiltered snapshot of a divided America. Rodriguez studied Terence more carefully. The man's composure was unnatural. It wasn't the sullen silence of guilt, nor the frantic protests of innocence. It was the patience of a chess master who knows the endgame is inevitable. "Mr. Washington," Rodriguez said, his tone shifting from authoritative to cautiously conciliatory, "can you provide any other proof of residence?" "The keys your officer confiscated opened my front door, my car, and my mailbox," Terence replied evenly. "Mrs. Carter across the street can verify I've lived here for 3 years. My name is on the deed in the county records, which is a matter of public record you could access from your patrol car's computer." "Keys can be copied," Sullivan insisted, his voice rising. "Cars can be stolen. He's lying." Rodriguez wasn't convinced, but the crowd was growing larger and more restless. The Hendersons were now openly filming on an iPad. Mrs. Patterson had called her husband, a retired judge. The Wilson twins were providing a shaky, narrated live stream of their own. "Look," Rodriguez said, trying to wrest back control, to de-escalate. "Let's just take a minute, verify the residence with dispatch, and—" "No!" Sullivan stepped forward aggressively, cutting his sergeant off. The insubordination was a measure of his panic. "I'm not playing games with this. He's trespassing. He's been uncooperative from the start, and now he's making threats." "What threats?" Rodriguez asked, his eyes narrowing. "Told me to remember my badge number. That's intimidation. He's trying to get in my head." Terence's phone rang for the 3rd time. The screen lit up, and the caller ID, Director Jensen, FBI, glowed for everyone in the immediate circle to see. Sullivan, seeing an opportunity to reassert dominance, grabbed the phone from Terence's pocket. "Drug dealer calling. Your parole officer, maybe?" he answered with a mocking, theatrical tone. "Hello, this is Officer Sullivan. Your boy Terence is under arrest." The voice on the other end was sharp, clipped, and carried an unmistakable aura of authority even through the tiny speaker. "Excuse me? I said your buddy's under arrest," Sullivan repeated, grinning at Mills. "You want to post bail? Call the station in a few hours." "Officer, this is FBI Director Sarah Jensen. I need to speak with Agent Washington immediately." Sullivan's grin faltered, then reformed, more forced this time. "FBI? Yeah, right. And I'm the President of the United States." Rodriguez stepped closer, alarm bells clanging in his head. "Sullivan, for God's sake, hang up the phone." But Sullivan was committed to the bit, his bravado a sinking ship. "Listen here, whoever you are. This is a police matter. Your friend is going downtown in cuffs." "Agent Washington is a federal officer. I'm ordering you to release him immediately." "Agent." Sullivan laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "This guy, he's a criminal, a damn trespasser." The line went dead. "It wasn't," Sullivan insisted, but the words lacked all conviction. He sounded like a child trying to convince himself the monster wasn't in the closet. "It's some kind of setup, a prank." Mrs. Carter's live stream had reached 15,000 viewers. The comments were a blur of outrage and anticipation. 3 news vans were now visible in the distance, their satellite dishes rising like mechanical mushrooms. Terence remained perfectly still against the patrol car, but his eyes found his watch. The encrypted display showed a new, final message. Federal response authorized. ETA 60 seconds. "Officers," Terence spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a gavel. "I'm going to give you one more opportunity to de-escalate this situation.